The building had a way of making people feel small before they ever spoke. Glass rose and clean, arrogant lines, reflecting the city back at itself as if nothing inside mattered more than power. She paused just long enough at the revolving doors to smooth her skirt and steady her breathing. This wasn't new territory. Offices like this existed everywhere. Polished floors, controlled smiles, the quiet understanding that some people belonged and others were merely tolerated. She stepped inside. Cool air brushed her skin. The lobby opened wide and bright, marble stretching beneath her feet, the ceiling so high it swallowed sound. A security desk sat dead center like a checkpoint, flanked by chrome planters and a tall brochure stand stacked with glossy company magazines. She walked toward the reception area, heels clicking softly, each step deliberate. In her hands, a slim folder, neat, organized, proof that she was here for a reason. A few heads turned. They always did. Sometimes curiosity. Sometimes judgment. She had learned to read the difference without flinching. She was 3 steps from the desk when it happened. A sudden tug at her hip. A sharp resistance. Then the unmistakable sound of fabric tearing. The rip echoed louder than it should have. For a fraction of a second, the lobby froze. Her body did before her mind caught up, hands instinctively dropping to her sides as heat rushed to her face. She felt the air against her leg, the exposed skin that hadn't been there a moment ago. Her breath caught, not in panic, but in disbelief. Then came the reactions. A quick inhale from somewhere behind her. A cough that sounded suspiciously like laughter. Someone's phone chimed as a camera unlocked. She turned just enough to see the culprit, a jagged metal corner on the brochure stand, sharp and careless, the hem of her skirt still caught like evidence. She pressed her palms against the torn fabric, trying to close the gap, her mind racing through options that all felt too slow. The receptionist stared at her, eyes wide, mouth parted, doing nothing. A man leaning against a column let out a low chuckle. "Wow," he said. "That's unfortunate." Her jaw tightened. She swallowed and faced the desk. "Could I use the restroom, please?" Her voice was quiet but steady, as if calm might stitch dignity back into place. The receptionist blinked, then glanced toward security. "Do you have a visitor badge?" "I was just checking in." A guard stepped closer, posture relaxed, eyes flicking briefly to the tear before settling back into indifference. "Policy says visitors need clearance before accessing facilities." She looked at him, really looked, searching for a hint of humanity. "My skirt tore." He shrugged. "You'll need to wait." The laughter grew bolder now, no longer hiding behind throats. Someone murmured something about dress codes. Another voice, sharp, amused, said, "Guess that's one way to make an entrance." Her fingers curled into the fabric, knuckles white. She could feel eyes everywhere, grazing, judging, consuming the moment like entertainment. A woman nearby shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse, but said nothing. A man raised his phone openly now, framing the scene. "Please," she said again, softer this time. "Just a minute." The guard shook his head. "Step aside." She did, moving to the edge of the desk, her back straight, chin lifted. If she was going to stand there, she would do it on her own terms. She angled her body, using the folder to cover what she could, heart pounding not from fear but from a familiar, simmering anger. The kind that came from knowing this wasn't just an accident anymore. It was a choice, made again and again by every person who watched instead of helped. Time stretched. The marble floor felt colder under her heels. Someone offered a jacket half-heartedly, then hesitated when their friend whispered something and laughed. The jacket was pulled back. Apologies dissolved into awkward silence. She lowered herself into a chair near the desk, movements controlled, as if she were choosing to sit rather than being sidelined. The guard hovered nearby, arms crossed, authority worn like a badge of convenience. "Do you want to reschedule?" he asked, not unkindly, but without care. "No," she replied. One word. Final. She opened her folder and stared at the pages, though the words blurred. Around her, conversations resumed in hushed tones, glances darting toward her and away again. She caught fragments, assumptions stitched together from ignorance. Why she was there. What she must be like. How she should have known better. Her phone buzzed softly in her bag. She ignored it. This moment didn't need witnesses outside these walls. She breathed in, then out, grounding herself in the simple rhythm of staying. The elevator indicator above the doors ticked downward. Someone near the windows scoffed. Unprofessional, they muttered, not bothering to lower their voice. Her gaze lifted, meeting theirs briefly. The scoff died in their throat. She said nothing. Silence, she had learned, could be louder than defense. The elevator chimed. Heads turned almost in unison. The doors slid open, revealing polished shoes first, then the crisp line of tailored trousers. A man stepped out, posture relaxed, presence immediate. Conversations faltered, then stopped altogether. The guard straightened instinctively. The receptionist sat up, smoothing her blouse as if caught mid-mistake. The man's eyes swept the lobby with practiced ease, cataloging details in seconds. Then they found her. For just a moment, barely visible, something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Concern, quickly masked. He walked toward her, steps measured, unhurried, as if the space itself made room for him. Whispers sparked behind his back. Someone breathed. He's early. Another hissed. That's? He stopped in front of her. Are you hurt? He asked quietly, voice low enough that only she could hear. She shook her head once. No. He glanced at the torn fabric, then back at her face. His jaw tightened, not with anger yet, but restraint. He turned toward the desk. What happened? He asked. No one answered immediately. The manager rushed forward, smile stretched thin, hands gesturing too much. Sir, it's nothing serious. Just a small mishap. We're handling it. The man nodded slowly. Good. He looked at the guard. Why is she still here? Policy. The guard began. Bring everyone upstairs, the man said, interrupting gently. Conference floor. Now. The word now landed with weight. As people moved, uncertainty rippled through the room. Curious glances followed her as she stood, adjusting her grip on the folder. Someone whispered, confused. Who is she? Another answered. I don't know, but this just got interesting. She walked toward the elevator, the man beside her, his presence steady like an anchor. The doors closed behind them, sealing the lobby and its laughter away. As the elevator began to rise, she finally let herself exhale, slow, controlled. She didn't look at him yet. She didn't need to. Whatever this meeting was meant to be, it had already changed. And it wasn't over. The elevator climbed in silence, glass walls reflecting the city as it fell away beneath them. No one spoke. The hum of the cables filled the space between breaths. She focused on that sound, on the steady upward motion, refusing to let the last 10 minutes replay in her head. The tear. The laughter. The way help had hovered just out of reach, and then disappeared. When the doors opened, the atmosphere changed immediately. This floor was quieter, sharper, designed for authority. Thick carpet muted footsteps. Frosted glass walls framed conference rooms like controlled secrets. People stood waiting, assistants, managers, executives, some holding tablets, others clutching coffee cups that had gone untouched. Every pair of eyes slid toward her, then quickly away, then back again. The man beside her stepped forward, addressing the room without raising his voice. Everyone inside. They obeyed. She felt it again, that shift. The subtle reordering of power. People who had laughed downstairs now stood straighter, faces neutral, professionalism snapped into place like a uniform. Yet the looks didn't stop. They simply changed shape. Curiosity replaced amusement. Judgment dressed itself as concern. Inside the conference room, chairs scraped softly as people found places along the long glass table. No one seemed certain where to sit, as if the rules had quietly rewritten themselves. She remained standing near the door, one hand holding her folder, the other still guarding the torn fabric. An assistant approached, eyes flicking nervously to her skirt. Would you like something to cover? Before the sentence finished, a manager cut in smoothly. She's fine. Let's stay focused. The assistant stepped back, embarrassed. She felt the sting of it, not the interruption, but the ease with which her comfort was dismissed again. Focused. As if dignity were a distraction. The man moved to the head of the table but did not sit. He placed his phone down, screen dark, and rested his hands lightly on the polished surface. Before we begin, he said, I want a clear account of what happened in the lobby. A beat passed. Then another. The same manager from downstairs cleared his throat. It was an unfortunate accident. A visitor caught her clothing on company property. Security followed protocol. Which protocol? The man asked. The standard visitor procedure. Standard, he repeated, eyes steady. Does that include allowing mockery? The room stiffened. Someone laughed nervously, then stopped when no one joined in. It wasn't mockery, the manager said quickly. People were surprised. She felt the word land like an insult wrapped in politeness. Surprised, the man echoed again. He turned his gaze toward the others. Anyone else want to explain the laughter? Silence. She could feel it building now, the tension pressing in from all sides, the unspoken hope that if no one spoke, the moment would pass. That she would shrink into the background and become a story told later, edited and softened. She straightened. I can explain, she said. The sound of her voice cut through the room cleanly. Heads turned. A few brows furrowed, as if they had forgotten she was allowed to speak. She took a step forward. My skirt tore on a broken fixture that shouldn't have been there. I asked for help. I was denied. Then I was laughed at. That's not entirely fair, someone said from the far end of the table. No one meant. I didn't ask what you meant, she replied calmly. I'm telling you what happened. The man at the head of the table watched her closely now, something like pride flickering briefly in his eyes before settling into focus again. A woman near the window shifted in her seat. Maybe this is being blown out of proportion, she said carefully. Accidents happen. Yes, she agreed. And responses matter more than accidents. The room fell quiet again, heavier this time. The manager leaned forward, trying a different angle. Look, we regret the discomfort. Truly. But we have a full agenda today. Perhaps we can address this later, privately. Privately. She almost smiled at the word. Almost. Before she could respond, the man raised a hand, not sharply, but decisively. There will be no later. His voice remained calm, but the air shifted with it. He gestured to the torn edge of her skirt. Do you know how many people saw this? The manager hesitated. Enough, the man said. And not one thought to act. A security supervisor spoke up, defensive now. We were following orders. Orders to humiliate? The man asked. No, sir. Orders to maintain protocol. Then your protocol is broken. A murmur rippled through the room. She could sense discomfort spreading, the creeping realization that this wasn't going to be smoothed over with apologies and handshakes. An assistant quietly placed a folded blazer on the table near her. This time, no one stopped them. She hesitated, then draped it over her shoulders, not as cover, but as choice. The simple gesture grounded her. Gave her back a piece of control. The man nodded slightly, acknowledging it, then looked back at the room. Let's be clear, he said. This company prides itself on values. Inclusion. Respect. Today, those words were decoration. The manager bristled. With all due respect, sir, this is becoming personal. It became personal the moment she was treated as less than human. The man replied evenly. Eyes flicked between them now. People were recalculating, alliances, risks, what this moment might cost them. Someone whispered. Who is she to him? The question hung in the air, unanswered, growing heavier by the second. The man turned to her then, lowering his voice just enough to soften the edge. Do you want to continue? She met his gaze. Yes. That single word carried more weight than any speech. He straightened and addressed the room again. Good. Because we're going to talk about accountability. A few people shifted uncomfortably. A pen rolled off the table and clattered to the floor, the sound too loud in the silence. Accountability, he continued, means recognizing harm even when it wasn't intentional. Especially then. The manager exhaled sharply. Are you saying people should be punished over a misunderstanding? I'm saying, the man replied, that power shows itself in moments like this. He paused, letting the tension stretch. And so does character. All eyes were on him now. The room felt suspended, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. She sensed it too, the approaching turn, the truth pressing closer to the surface. The man glanced at his phone, then back at the room. There's one more thing, he said. Before we move forward. He looked at her again, and this time, he didn't hide the familiarity in his eyes. I think it's time everyone understood exactly who you're dealing with. The silence sharpened, anticipation coiling tight. And somewhere deep in the room, certainty cracked. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. People shifted in their seats, clearing throats, straightening jackets, trying to look prepared for whatever was coming while clearly having no idea what it was. The glass walls of the conference room reflected them back at themselves, faces composed on the surface, tension flickering underneath. He didn't rush it. He turned slightly, angling his body toward her, not shielding her, not positioning himself in front, just standing beside her as if that was where he belonged. The simple act spoke louder than anything he had said so far. She felt it immediately, the change in how the room looked at them now, the way proximity rewrote assumptions. You asked who she is? He said calmly, addressing the room without pointing at anyone. That question alone tells me everything I need to know. A few people stiffened. Someone at the far end of the table swallowed hard. She didn't come here asking for favors, he continued. She didn't come here expecting special treatment. She came because she was invited. Because her work matters. He paused, then added, and because she trusted that this place would treat her like a professional. The manager shifted in his chair. Sir, if this is about credentials, we can review. He raised a hand, stopping him again. This isn't about credentials. He turned to her now. Would you like to tell them how long you hesitated before walking through those doors this morning? She drew in a breath. The room leaned in, collectively, whether they meant to or not. I stood outside for almost 5 minutes, she said. Not because I was late. Not because I was unsure of my work. But because I knew that once I walked in, I wouldn't just be seen as a consultant. I'd be seen as something else first. A woman near the window lowered her eyes. I told myself it didn't matter, she continued. That professionalism would speak louder than perception. I was wrong. Her voice didn't waver. That seemed to unsettle them more than anger would have. He let her finish, then nodded once. Thank you? He faced the room again. No, he said. Here's the part you didn't anticipate. He placed one hand on the back of her chair, fingers relaxed, possessive without being performative. She is my wife. The words landed like a controlled detonation. Air left the room all at once. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person whispered something under their breath that sounded like disbelief. The manager's face drained of color so quickly it was almost alarming. The guard who had followed them upstairs stared at the table, suddenly fascinated by the grain of the wood. For a moment, no one spoke. No one seemed to trust their voice. Then someone laughed, short, strained, reflexive, and immediately stopped when no one joined in. His tone didn't change. I'm also the CEO of this company. That did it. Chairs shifted loudly now. A tablet slipped from someone's lap and hit the carpet with a dull thud. The woman who had earlier suggested the incident was being blown out of proportion looked as if she'd been physically struck by the realization. The manager stood halfway out of his chair, then sat back down, hands gripping the armrests. Sir, I didn't know. I know, he replied. That's the problem. She felt the room reorient around them, the axis of power snapping cleanly into place. The same people who had laughed, who had looked away, who had spoken about policy in proportion, now couldn't meet her eyes. Respect rushed in too late, clumsy and obvious. He continued, "You didn't know who she was married to. You didn't know her last name. You didn't know her influence. And because you didn't know, you decided she didn't matter." "No," the manager said quickly. "That's not." "It is," he said, not raising his voice. "Because the moment you realized who she was connected to, your behavior changed. That tells me everything." He walked slowly along the length of the table now, measured steps, eyes moving from face to face. "Let me be clear. If the only time you show respect is when you fear consequences, you don't understand respect at all." No one interrupted him this time. "She was laughed at," he continued. "Denied basic decency. Treated like an inconvenience. And it happened in my building, under my leadership." He stopped, turning back toward her. "And I owe her an apology." The room froze again. He looked at her fully now. "I am sorry," he said simply. "Not because I'm your husband. Because I'm responsible." The sincerity in his voice tightened something in her chest she hadn't realized was there. She nodded once. "Thank you." He turned back to the others. "Now comes the part you're really uncomfortable with." Several people straightened instinctively. "Accountability," he said. "Not performative apologies. Not closed-door discussions designed to protect reputations. Real accountability." He gestured toward the manager. "You saw a woman in distress and chose efficiency over humanity." The manager opened his mouth, then closed it again. "You," he said, turning to the guard, "used policy as a shield to avoid responsibility." The guard nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." "And the rest of you," he said, sweeping the room with his gaze, "watched." That word hung heavier than the rest. "Watching," he continued, "is a decision. Silence is a decision. Laughter is a decision." He stopped pacing. "This company will not be a place where those decisions go unexamined." A long pause followed. The city outside the glass walls looked distant now, unreal. She could feel eyes drifting back toward her, careful, almost fearful. The same people who hadn't known where to look earlier now seemed unsure how to look at all. He spoke again. "Effective immediately, the lobby fixture that caused this incident is removed. Security protocol is revised. And training begins today, not next quarter." The manager nodded rapidly. "Of course. And you," he added, voice cool, "will be stepping down from your current role. Not as punishment, but as consequence." The manager's mouth opened. "Sir? You failed a test you didn't know you were taking," he said. "We all do, eventually." The words settled final. He turned back to her, his expression softer now, no audience in his eyes anymore. "Are you ready to continue the meeting?" She looked around the room, at the lowered gazes, the stiff apologies waiting to be spoken, the sudden reverence that hadn't existed an hour ago. "Yes," she said. "But not like this." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "I didn't come here to be protected," she continued. "I came to be heard." A quiet respect settled over the room, not forced this time, but earned. He smiled, just barely. "Then let's listen." As she stepped forward, the room made space without being asked. And for the first time since she'd walked through those doors, the silence that followed wasn't heavy with judgment. It was charged with change. The room didn't rush to fill the silence after she spoke. It settled instead, slower and deeper, like something finally finding its proper shape. People shifted, but this time it wasn't discomfort, it was recalibration. The kind that came when certainty cracked and something more honest had to replace it. She moved to the table, placing her folder down carefully. The blazer rested on her shoulders, not hiding the tear but framing it, a quiet refusal to pretend nothing had happened. She opened the folder, slid a page free, and began. Her voice was steady, practiced, clear. She spoke of strategy, of overlooked efficiencies, of data that told a story no one in the room had bothered to read. As she spoke, heads lifted. Pens moved. Screens glowed. The laughter from downstairs felt impossibly distant now, like it belonged to another lifetime. She finished and looked up. That's the proposal. For a moment, no one spoke. Then someone nodded. Another leaned forward. Questions followed, not dismissive, not patronizing, but precise. Engaged. She answered them easily, her confidence no longer something she had to guard. He watched from the head of the table, saying little, letting the room learn the lesson it needed to learn without his voice dominating it. When the discussion wound down, he stood. "We'll proceed," he said. "And we'll do so with respect, for the work, and for the person who brought it." The meeting ended not with applause, but with something better, quiet acknowledgement. Chairs slid back. People gathered their things. A few stopped in front of her, offering apologies that sounded less rehearsed now, more human. She accepted them without ceremony. Forgiveness didn't need a spotlight. When the room emptied, only the two of them remained, the city humming faintly beyond the glass. He walked to her side and took her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked again, this time without witnesses. She considered the question. The morning replayed itself, every glance, every word, every choice made by people who thought they were unseen. "I am," she said. "But I won't forget." He nodded. "Neither will they." They left together, walking back through the corridor where earlier whispers had traveled like sparks. Now doors opened quietly as they passed. People looked up, not to stare, but to acknowledge. The difference mattered. In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the glass. The tear was still there. She touched it lightly, then let her hand fall. "You know," she said. "For a moment I almost walked out." "I know," he replied. "I would have understood. But I stayed," she said. "Because if I left, they would have learned nothing." The elevator chimed and the doors opened to the lobby. It looked different now. The brochure stand was gone, the jagged edge erased as if it had never existed. The floor shone the same, the desk stood where it always had, but the energy had shifted. People stood straighter. Voices lowered. Eyes met hers and held. The guard stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, voice careful, "I owe you an apology." She met his gaze. "You owe the next person better," she said gently. "That's all." He nodded, understanding landing late but landing nonetheless. Outside, sunlight washed the street clean. The city moved on, unaware of the small correction that had just occurred inside one of its glass towers. She breathed it in, the simple relief of air without judgment. As they walked, her phone buzzed again. She checked it this time. A message from a colleague. Another from a client. The world hadn't paused for her humiliation, and she didn't want it to. She wanted it to move forward, carrying the change with it. They stopped at the corner. Traffic flowed. Life resumed its indifferent rhythm. "You didn't have to reveal who you were," she said. "You could have let me handle it alone." "I could have," he agreed. "But I wanted them to understand something." "What?" "That respect shouldn't depend on proximity to power," he said. "And when it does, power has a responsibility to correct it." She smiled, small and real. "Next time," she said, "I'll bring a spare." He chuckled. "Next time," he replied, "they'll bring their conscience." They parted for the day with a kiss that didn't ask permission from anyone watching. As she walked away, she felt lighter, not because justice had been served, but because she had been seen, heard, and believed on her own terms. Back inside the building, people returned to their desks with a story they wouldn't tell the way it began. They would talk about the day the air changed. The day a mirror was held up. The day laughter turned into learning. And somewhere between the polished floors and the glass walls, a simple truth settled in, impossible to ignore now: dignity isn't granted by titles. It's revealed by how you act when you think no one important is watching.